girls! So I've got a list of girl Tumblr movies that I want to share with you guys today. These are movies that I watched when I was a teenager and movies that I feel really shaped me into the girl that I am, which is really crazy to think about. But there are so many movies that I want to go through today. Recently, I've been going through them and rewatching them with my boyfriend because, lucky for me, I don't have a man who was into film ever in his life. So I get to be the one to introduce him to all the movies that I really loved as a teenager and as a girl on Tumblr. Lord, please watch over me because, God, that was a interesting time. I'm surrounded by all of my girl artifacts right here. Of course, this isn't everything girly that I have, but these are some of my totems, some of my amulets, I guess you could say. So I just want to go through this list of movies that I have here for you today. These are all movies that for me personally were like life-changing when I was in high school, and movies that I just thought, oh my God, like I can't wait to watch another movie that's just like this but not this. You know how you find a song and you're like, oh, I want another song that's just like this one but not this one, but I want another one like this and I want to eat it up. I've compiled a list of movies and I feel like there's a couple different categories of movies here, and I've got my little iPad in front of me, flex. There's a couple of like artsy movies, I would say, some that were like really popular on Tumblr. There are some that were really popular across like all platforms. So like these were movies that were streamed on like basic cable like all the time. And then there are movies that are more like younger leaning, like maybe you watched them when you were like 13 as opposed to something that you would watch when you were like 16, 17. So there might be movies on here that are a little bit more mature if you're like someone younger watching this video right now. But what I will say is I watched these movies, maybe not at 13, but most of these movies I watched by the time I was 17. So, do with that what you will. If you want to watch these movies and, whatever, like go ahead and watch them, girl, because I'm not going to be the one to stop you, you know what I mean? If you want to watch them on your laptop when your parents are asleep, you should do that. Like, whatever. Anyways, I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of start with the movies that I watched first. And then we're going to go into the movies that are a little bit heavier and a little bit more like, ooh, these were kind of crazy, but, they were still impactful in their own way. And I feel like these movies to me represent girlhood in their own like different ways. And so just like growing up as a teenager in America, I just feel like these are the movies that kind of encapsulate it all and like describe girlhood. Not for everyone, obviously. A lot of these movies are mostly white female leads. Actually, I think all of them on this list are. So this is definitely not covering everything, but these are just movies that I saw on Tumblr growing up. Anyways, I'm kind of rambling now, so I'm just going to get into my list. One of the first movies that I remember being introduced to was Aquamarine. Okay, if you're a girl, you know that being a mermaid was probably one of the most influential things like growing up in middle school and like early high school. Like I feel like first of all of us girls played mermaids in a pool at one time or in a body of water. Like you wanted to be a mermaid. Their aesthetic was just so perfect. When I first saw Aquamarine, I felt like my world changed. My world shifted. Like this was my favorite movie ever. I swear, in middle school. Like I would watch it all the time. It was one of my favorite movies. I had it on DVD. Who knows where that DVD is now, but oh my God, I loved that movie so much. Basically, in Aquamarine, if you don't know, I'll kind of summarize it a little bit. So Aquamarine is about these two best friends named Haley and Claire. Claire's grandparents own this beach club. I forget what it's called, but basically one night there's a huge storm, and I don't know if they're on the east or the west coast, but whatever, they're on some type of coast. There's a huge storm one day, and the waves are so large that it washes up all this extra stuff into the pool that's associated with their beach club. Come to find out, in that pool is a GD mermaid, like a full-on mermaid, okay? She's absolutely gorgeous. Typical blonde, but the blonde has blue streaks in her hair. Oh my god. Like, if bleaching your hair didn't destroy it, like, holy shit, I would do that hairstyle right now. Like, I would get my hair bleached and I would get the blue streaks because that look is iconic. I love that hair so much. Like, she looks so good in it. And then on top of that, so okay, this mermaid, we find out her name is Aquamarine, but she goes by like Aqua for short. Aquamarine is like this gorgeous girl. Haley like gives her sweater and she turns it into a dress. I feel like she just girlifies them a little bit more. Like, I don't know how to explain it, but I just feel like she brings a little bit of girliness back into their lives and like the magic of girlness. They end up going through this whole thing, and Aquamarine has like run away from her dad, who's like Poseidon, I guess, or he's just like the ruler of the seas or whatever, the king of the sea. So that's why he created this huge storm, because he was upset that she ran away from home. But it's because she was going to be in an arranged marriage, so she ran away from home to find true love. So Haley and Claire, who are the typical like teenage girls who are reading Cosmopolitan, 17 magazine, Teen Vogue, like all those little magazines, or like J14, like all that stuff that you would get as a teenager. All those magazines would tell you like tips in them on like how to talk to boys or like how to manage relationships and things like that. And I remember being that age as well and begging my mom to get me those magazines. So they start teaching Aquamarine all of their tricks, all of their tips to get this guy named Ray, who's like the hottie in town, okay? And they want to get Ray to love Aquamarine. That's basically the whole objective of the movie, is like trying to get Aquamarine to get Ray to fall in love with her. But it's not that easy. It's not that simple to get somebody to just love you, especially within like a week, because I think she only had like 8 days or something to do this. So yeah, of course he wasn't gonna fall in love with her like deeply like that. So what ends up happening though is that, of course, through the power of friendship and girl love, that is how Aquamarine proves to her dad that true love does exist. Haley and Claire end up being like, no, Aquamarine, like, we love you. Like, we love you. We would do anything for you. Right now, there's literally a sound on TikTok that's trending from that movie, which is like it's the scene where Aquamarine is like, oh, I love using starfish as earrings because they give me compliments. And they're like, Aqua, 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 you're so beautiful. Like, and let me tell you, watching that movie, that scene is monumental in that movie. Okay, so when you watch that, you're gonna feel like the genuine impact of that scene, because it's just so cute, and it's like little starfish like telling you compliments. One of the next movies that I remember being introduced to as a kid is 13 Going on 30. I think everyone knows this movie probably, but if you don't, this is obviously another iconic girl movie. This movie is with Jennifer Garner, Mark Ruffalo, which Mark Ruffalo became one of my favorite actors when I was like a young girl, because he was in so many of the rom-coms of that time. So Jennifer Garner, basically she's at her like 13th birthday party or whatever, and she makes a wish that she wishes she could be like a older girl. Like, she wishes it was like 20 years from now or something. She wakes up to find out that her wish has come true, and she is now literally 30 years old, which, I mean, no offense to the 30-year-olds, but like, why pick 30? Like, why not 20? But I think it was like 30 is the new 20. Maybe she saw that in a magazine. I can't remember exactly. It's been a while since I've watched this one. She finds out, you know, being an older girl isn't all it's cracked up to be, but she learns a lot of lessons along the way, and then eventually, you know, she sees Mark Ruffalo, who I think was like a childhood friend at one point, but then she sees him older and she's like, damn, you're handsome, like, okay. And yeah, and so anyway, she ends up being a teenager because like the spell is like over and she has to go back. But seeing all that she knows now as a 30-year-old, she goes back in time and she really changes it up, you know. She's like gone back with a little bit more of a mature lens, and that's basically the whole premise of the movie. I know that was like a really quick rundown, but I will say I just have watched this movie so much that, you know, a lot of the scenes that were impactful at one point, now it's like, okay, like I've seen this so much. So not saying that it's not a movie that withstands the test of time. Like, it definitely does, and it's always a classic, and it's definitely a fun movie to watch. It's just, I literally watched this movie way too much, I think, as a kid, and what I think, like, kind of took the mystique away from this movie is when I saw the exact replica of that dress. Like, they made it on Shein or something, and, like, a bunch of girls had it, and I was like, oh, no, like, this was supposed to be a one-of-a-kind dress, you know? Like, which brings me to my next movie, Uptown Girls. Uptown Girls. Now, this movie is a classic, and this is another movie that a TikTok sound is trending from this movie. Anyways, in Uptown Girls, going back to the dress, there's this iconic dress that Brittany Murphy wears in the very first, like, couple scenes that we see her in, and it's her birthday party dress. This dress is so beautiful. I don't know what the brand is of this dress. It's probably some type of designer. It's gorgeous. And let me tell you, I was pissed to find out that Ivy Getty has this effing dress. Like, I'm sorry, but can we keep, like, the iconic one-of-a-kind dresses away from the Nepo babies? Like, put that shit in a museum, okay? I don't know, like, maybe obviously I'm jealous because I would want that dress. Like, I want it, okay? Ivy Getty, give it to me. But I saw her wearing it in a TikTok, and I was like, we cannot have anything. Like, we literally can't have anything. Brittany Murphy plays a girl named Molly Gunn, who is the daughter of a now deceased famous rock star, okay? And Dakota Fanning plays this little girl named Ray. Basically, what ends up happening is that Molly Gunn's accountant steals all her money, and she has to find a way to make money now because she has nothing left in her trust fund. She gets this job to nanny Ray, and Ray is like a very uptight little girl. She's very, like, she's got her schedules. She only listens to classical music. She's a very wound up person, and Molly Gunn is the absolute opposite of this. She is carefree, she's silly, she's funny, she dances to whatever, and over time she kind of loosens up Ray, and Ray becomes like this fun little girl, like how she really should be. Ray teaches Molly at the same time, like, to be a little bit more responsible. And one of my favorite lines in the movie is basically at one point Ray says to Molly, like, something about, like, it's too bad, like, I don't see any grown-ups around here. Saying, like, a backhanded, like, a diss to Molly, because Molly is obviously a little bit immature. And by the end of the movie, this ends up becoming a good thing. And Ray says to Molly something along the lines of, like, yeah, but now, like, you're an adult now and you've got to do your own things. And Molly Gunn says to her now, well, I don't see any grown-ups around here. And it's just such a sweet, like, little full circle moment of that movie. And Uptown Girls is just one of my favorite movies. And now, living on the Upper West Side, it's something that is so fun to me because I get to see all these scenes of them. And obviously, I think Ray and her, like, they live on the Upper East Side, which is obviously the opposite side. It's still fun and still to, like, have this vibe of, like, Uptown Girl. Like, I don't know, now I feel like it fits me. One of the next movies on my list is Pretty Woman. Shout out Julia Roberts. Okay, shout out Julia Roberts. Pretty Woman is a movie about a sex worker who one night gets picked up by this man played by Richard Gere. Richard Gere is so handsome back in the day. Holy shit. And basically, Julia Roberts is the sex worker. She ends up getting picked up by Richard Gere in his car. And he doesn't, like, pick her up, but basically he's lost and he ends up, like, stalling his car because it's a stick shift. He ends up stalling the car right next to her. So she goes up to him and she's like, hey, like, what can I do for you? And he's like, I'm lost. And she ends up getting into his car to give him directions to a hotel in Beverly Hills, something like that. Long story short, he ends up liking her because she's a spunky girl. She's quirky. She says it like it is, but she's also sweet. She's funny without trying, you know? Like, she doesn't know that she's funny. She's one of those girls. He says to her, like, I'm going to be here for 6 more days because he has such a good night with her. And he's like, I want you to stay here for the next 6 days. I'll pay you your rate, whatever it is. And I just want you to basically be my girlfriend for 6 days. She's like, okay. Like, she's kind of skeptical of it at first, but she's like, okay, but like, you can't afford me, is kind of what she says. And he's like, try me. And she just says $3,000, something like that. I'm like, girl, this man is a billionaire, like, or a millionaire. I don't exactly know, but he makes a lot of money. One of the most iconic scenes from this movie that is referenced all the time is the scene where Julia Roberts goes into a store, okay? And at this point, she's not dressed very elegantly, whatever. And during this time, because I think this was filmed 1989, something around that, 89, 90, okay? During this time, you know, people were a little bit more prude-ish. They were definitely judging books by their covers. Long story short, I digress. She goes into the shop and they refuse to help her because they see that she seems like she has no money to spend in the store, which is the opposite of the case because she's got Richard Gere's credit card, and she's ready to spend that thing. Like, she gets rejected. She goes home. She is like fed up with this. She's like, I tried to get nice dresses because the owner of the hotel is like, girl, you can't come up here looking like this because this is like an elegant hotel, whatever. She's like, I tried to get new dresses, but they wouldn't help me. That becomes like this big thing, but he helps her. Okay, he's really nice and he helps her to like go see this other girl who helps her get all these nice dresses, all these new clothes. This is where the iconic scene comes in, okay? Because we need all that context for this scene to happen. She goes back to the store, dressed to the nines, and all these shopping bags in hand, and she's like, oh, you know, like, they're trying to help her, and they're like, what can I help you with, miss? And they're like, do you girls remember me? I was here the other day, and you didn't want to help me. And they're like, oh. And then she's like, you girls work on commission, right? And they're like, still like, what? Like, what's going on? And she's like, big mistake. Huge. Moving on, another movie that I absolutely love is Practical Magic. This is a movie that I need to rewatch, though, because I genuinely don't remember what happens in this, besides the fact that it's 2 sisters and they are witches. Okay, they are witches, and this is kind of a secret, I think. Like, I don't think the whole town knows that they're witches, but maybe speculate. It's with Sandra Bullock and Nicole Kidman, okay? I just remember this being such a cute, like, Halloween time movie. And let me just say, all the girls, you all talk about Hocus Pocus and Halloween Town. You all are forgetting about Practical Magic, okay? Do not leave Practical Magic in the dust, because Practical Magic is such an underrated Halloween girl witch movie, okay? And you guys are doing the same thing with that movie Twitches, with the twin witches, because I don't see that one coming up anymore, and it's not right. Let me just say, it's not right. Quick moving on, okay? I would say the last movie in my little, like, PG-13, like, absolutely appropriate for anybody movie is A Walk to Remember. A Walk to Remember is about this girl with Mandy Moore. Mandy Moore, and her love interest is played by Shane West, who in the movie goes by Landon Carter. Mandy Moore goes by Jamie Sullivan. Okay, so Landon is a bad boy, classic bad boy, and Jamie is the daughter of a pastor. Let me guess. He doesn't want her to date this guy. But also, he doesn't want Jamie to be dating because, plot twist, Jamie is ill. Okay, Jamie has a terminal illness. I think he doesn't want Jamie to experience like certain things because of her illness, but he also doesn't want Landon to get wrapped up in this because she's sick, so it's like she's gonna pass away soon. It's a very sweet movie. I love Mandy Moore's acting in this movie, and it's just a classic. You just gotta watch it. Classic girl movie. We're gonna be going back in time a little bit with this next movie. This next movie stars Molly Ringwald, and no, it's not 16 Candles. You uncultured little girl. It's Pretty in Pink. Is it the best movie ever? If you asked me when I was like 15, 16, it was. This movie, I have to read this because it's been a while since I watched this movie, but I watched this movie a ton when I was in high school, so I'm just gonna go off of what it says. Molly Ringwald plays a girl named Andy. She's an outcast at her Chicago high school. She either hangs out with her boss or she hangs out with her classmate who goes by the name Ducky, and Ducky has a crush on her. Oh, this is all coming back to me now. One of the rich kids named Blaine asks Andy out. It seems too good to be true. As Annie starts falling for Blaine, she begins to realize that dating someone from a different social sphere is not easy. I cannot believe this, but I forgot the iconic outfits that Molly Ringwald wears in this movie because it's so good. The outfits in Pretty in Pink are very good. I think by the end of the movie we realize that, or Ducky realizes that him and Andy are never going to be together, but like, I mean, girl, like I could have told you that because he's like a little bit shorter than her and not very cute, I have to say. Okay, so now we're getting into the movies that are a little bit more mature. So I want to start with the movie called LOL, or LOL. So LOL is a movie with Miley Cyrus and a bunch of other actors. In the movie, her name is Lola, but she goes by LOL. So that's why the movie is LOL, because she goes by LOL. This movie, it's got a couple different things going on. So she's got a little bit of issues with her mom, you know, typical teenager stuff. Miley Cyrus has kind of a complicated relationship with her mom. Her parents are divorced. She likes this boy, and her like original boyfriend like cheats on her or something like that, or is like, he's just like kind of rude to her. They end up breaking up, and she ends up hooking up with this guy who's like one of her best guy friends, something like that. And they start going out, and it becomes like this whole little love affair. They go to France on a school trip, and this is like a romantic moment for them, and it's like a bunch of like montages of them like being cute together. Everything culminates to like the mom reading her diary and finding out that Miley Cyrus had sex with this guy, and like this whole thing. Just, it's kind of like just about like the trials and tribulations of being a teenage girl, but a teenage girl who's kind of like a bad girl, you know? When I first watched this movie, I loved it from the very first watch, and I'm sure like if you want to give it a chance, you will love it too. The next movie I want to talk about is Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. This is another one that I think is like a classic Tumblr movie. Maybe not so much a girl movie, but kind of is, because whatever, Kate Winslet is in it, Jim Carrey, and they're both just so good in this movie. And this movie is basically about, you get your heart broken, and there's this experiment where you can get them erased from your mind. So Jim Carrey does this experiment. I think it's a girl movie because when you watch this movie, I feel like everyone kind of wants to be like Clementine. At least I did. Like, because Clementine is that quirky girl, like the quirky manic pixie dream girl. I think this character, her character Clementine in particular, is a perfect showcase of that. By the end of the movie, they kind of realize like, oh, I wish I hadn't erased those memories because they actually were nice to like look back on. So that one kind of diverges a little bit from the overall girl theme, but I still think it applies to a certain extent. Atonement is a movie with Keira Knightley, Saoirse Ronan, and James McAvoy. Saoirse Ronan's character has a crush on James McAvoy, but at one point in the movie, James McAvoy gets mad at Saoirse Ronan and is like, "You're a stupid little girl," because she tries to like fake drown so that she could see if he would save her, and he does, but he thinks she's like actually drowning, and he gets mad at her for faking something like that. In reality, James McAvoy's character likes Keira Knightley, and Keira Knightley is Saoirse Ronan's big sister in this movie. The big thing that starts is due to the fact that James McAvoy writes Keira Knightley a letter because they both like each other, but it's kind of that like just like love that is not spoken about. Like you both like each other, but no one will say it. He sees Saoirse Ronan's character, whose name is Bryony in the film. He sees Bryony and he's like, "Bryony, can you give this letter to your older sister? Please don't read it." She's like, "Sure." She immediately opens that girl up. It ends up being that James McAvoy accidentally gave Bryony, he gave her the wrong letter. The letter that he gave her was actually a sex letter to Keira Knightley. This letter ends up being the catalyst for all of the bad things that happen after this film. Bryony ends up telling a lie, which is also a big catalyst in this movie. I don't want to ruin the plot twist for anybody or this, I don't want to spoil it. And I won't say spoilers, and I won't say too much about what this movie is really about. It's based in the 1940s, World War II era. It's a little bit of a slow burn. I think it's one of those movies that once you watch it the first time, you'll like always be like, "Oh, I wish I could watch that movie for the first time again." Okay. So next on our little bit R-rated PG-15-ish rating list is a movie called Palo Alto, and it's with Emma Roberts and a couple other people. I have to look this up because I'm kind of forgetting. James Franco and Nat Wolff is in this movie as well. I almost forgot. Oh, and Margaret Qualley. So it's about these teens who live in Palo Alto, which is a town in California. They're a little bit rebellious. It kind of showcases the way that Tumblr also showcased California teens during this time. The basic big thing about this movie is that Emma Roberts' character starts to like her coach, her like soccer coach or whatever, who's played by James Franco. So it's about a lot about like having sex for the first time and doing drugs. I want to talk about Crybabies. It's not that good, okay? I'm gonna be honest with you. Johnny Depp's character, Crybaby, ends up falling in love with this girl, and Johnny Depp's character is, you guessed it, a bad boy. She is a good girl, and one day she decides she wants to be a bad girl, so she decides to go out with Johnny Depp's character, Crybaby. It basically follows Johnny Depp and kind of like the stuff he gets into as a bad boy, and I think at one point his girlfriend in the movie ends up getting pregnant. This movie is just a very Tumblr girl movie. Is it good? Not really, but is it a must watch? Yes. The next movie I want to talk about that's the same kind of genre-esque is Heathers. Heathers is a movie that I think is based off of a musical. The cast is Winona Ryder, and the guy, Jason Dean, is played by Christian Slater. Don't know who he is now. Okay, so there's like a clique, okay? There's a group of girls, and I think they're known as the Heathers. 4 of them are named Heather, so that's why they're called the Heathers, because they all have the name Heather. The whole premise of the movie is that Winona Ryder, her character kind of wants in with these girls. Veronica, that's her name, and she becomes part of the clique, and I think she eventually like becomes the leader of the Heathers. She starts kind of hanging out with this guy who starts murdering the popular kids one by one, but then they stage them as suicides. That's basically the premise of the movie, is that this guy kind of ends up going a little bit crazy, psycho, and starts killing a little bit too many people. By the end of it, well, I don't want to spoil it, but I mean, I've spoiled the other movies somewhat. This one, it's okay to be spoiled. You see it coming. So the next movie is 13. 13 is going viral right now on TikTok because people are like making edits of it. A lot of people like make videos with the audio of like, "Oh, where do you think I learned all this shit from? But basically it's about this girl named Tracy, and Tracy is a good girl. She gets along with her mom, but I mean, it's not the perfect childhood. One day she ends up befriending this girl named Evie, who's like the popular girl in school. Evie takes a liking to Tracy because I think she can tell that Tracy can be a little bit easily manipulated. The way they start being friends is basically like, hey, let's go shopping after school. But little does Tracy know is that they're not going to be doing shopping. They're going to be doing some shoplifting. So this is kind of her introduction into like being a bad girl with Evie. Eventually Tracy like ends up fighting with her mom a lot more and like getting into a lot more trouble with Evie. Evie kind of like slowly starts integrating herself more and more into Tracy and her mom's life, until eventually it's like Tracy's mom doesn't even recognize Tracy anymore. Obviously Evie and Tracy end up not being friends anymore. This movie and the next two are the ones that get into like the more heavy topics. The next movie in particular is definitely like trigger warning for anybody who has suffered with like an eating disorder, things like that. I'm going to be talking about Girl Interrupted. You don't want to listen to this or the next movie because the next movie deals with like unaliving. So just skip the ending of this video because those are the last two movies that I'm going to be talking about. So first off, Girl Interrupted. Again, Winona Ryder, Angelina Jolie, Brittany Murphy, and a bunch of other people. But those are the three heavy hitters. This movie is super heavy. It mostly centers around Winona Ryder, and her character is the narrator, and meeting Angelina Jolie's character, whose name is Lisa, and Brittany Murphy's character. Basically, all of them are in a psych ward together. They're in a mental hospital together, and they're all struggling with different things, different mental illnesses. The whole premise of the movie is basically like Winona Ryder becomes friends with Angelina Jolie's character, Lisa. They kind of become like best friends within this facility. Eventually, you kind of learn that Lisa's character has been there for a while, and they end up kind of escaping the mental hospital, but Winona Ryder's character kind of like realizes that this wasn't a good choice, and that like hanging out with Lisa wasn't really a good choice, and that Lisa is kind of psychotic, especially with the way that she treats Brittany Murphy's character towards the end of the movie. This movie is heavy. Like, it definitely gets to you, I would say. I would say after watching this movie, I was definitely left a little empty, a little bit like a shell. The next and last movie on my list that I want to touch on is The Virgin Suicide. The first time I watched this movie, I remember I was in high school and I watched it because, again, this was just like a classic, like, Tumblr was always like posting snippets of this movie, and I was just like, I need to know what this is about. Lo and behold, it's about four sisters who unalive themselves, but it's told from the perspective of the boys who live across from them, who can like see into their windows. These boys are obsessed with these girls, the Lisbon sisters, because they're just so like alluring, mysterious. Like, you don't really know, they don't know much about the Lisbon sisters except that they're all blonde, skinny, white. Kirsten Dunst is one of the sisters, and obviously she is a classic. Virgin Suicides, it's a very like aesthetic movie. I think there's a couple interviews where Sofia Coppola, who's the director, obviously talks about how she wanted to make a movie for girls because she felt like there wasn't a movie that represented what it was like to be a teenager. More specifically, what it was like to be a teenage girl. Yeah, Trip Fontaine, count your days, buddy. I won't spoil like the ways that they do it. You'll just have to watch for yourself. Without spoiling too much more, I obviously highly recommend this movie. I hope you guys enjoyed this video going through my list of girl movies. Let me know in the comments if I missed any, because I'm sure that I did, and there's some that I'm definitely not remembering because clearly my memory is quite bad, or if there's any movies that you think should be taken off the list or whatever. Honorable mentions for this list are Edward Scissorhands, Beetlejuice, Pearl. I feel like the upcoming Maxine is Coraline. I hope you don't mind that I kind of steered off the scary movie track and talked a little bit about my girly movies. But next video, don't worry, I will try to make a video on a scary movie and have it be scary themed. I hope you guys enjoyed this video.